Namaste. I, Simran Kaushal, welcome you all in today's episode of FRP on Hot Seat, only on Bharata First. Every week, our Bharata First team holds big picture quizzes. These quizzes are based upon big picture topics and other informative posts. You can actively participate now by using our Bharata First application or Bharata First Knowledge Center website. The links and details are provided in the description box below. The big picture quiz entry timings are from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. The winners from our daily quizzes participate in the mega quizzes. The ultimate winner from mega quiz joins us on our show FRP on Hot Seat, where the winner gets the exclusive chance to have conversation with Mr. Frank Rausen Pereira. Presenting everyone, this week mega quiz winner Prabhakaran from Textile City of Karur had appeared for CSC personality test once and also recruited to ACIO Intelligence Bureau. He is avid follower of cricket and international politics, who will be joining us. Namaste, Prabhakaran.
Yeah, namaste.
How
Hello
are
to
you?
everyone. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations on winning Mega Quiz.
Thanks a lot.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Prabhakaran. I'm from Karur district of Tamil Nadu. And as you have said, already said, I have previously appeared for civil service examination. And once I have cleared the main examination too. And presently I'm, looking after the business, which is mosquito net industries in our own city.
Prabhakaran, on this show, you can ask questions from Frank sir on all topics.
Okay, thank you.
Now it is time to welcome one and only Mr. Frank Rausen Pereira. Sir, I request you to kindly begin with the show.
There you go. I'm here finally. Vanakkam Prabhakaran. Can you hear me?
வணக்கம் சார் வணக்கம்
வணக்கம் நல்லா இருக்கீங்களா?
நல்லா இருக்கேங்க சார்.
Very nice. Congratulations on winning the mega quiz and being here. It's really, it feels really great and it feels good to be here with you, and I'm happy to be here as well. And yeah, it feels great to be sharing screen space with a fellow Southern Indian person. So good to be here, and congratulations, and the floor is now completely yours.
Thanks a lot, sir. I hope you're I believe so you belong to Karnataka, and we are neighbors, right? Anyway, I mean, we both belong to neighboring states, right?
So, yes, we do. If you can hear me, Prabhakaran, you can start. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Let me start with the education and health sector, sir. These are the two most important sectors which can be, used as an instrument to tackle most of the socio-economic problems of our country. And why aren't they getting the priority that has to be given? I mean, that they deserve.
I'm sorry, I didn't get you. Low priority in the sense, what kind of what kind of sectors?
Education and health.
Education and health are not getting priority. That's what you're suggesting, yes, right?
Because these are the most important tools to tackle most of our socio-economic problems. But the percentage of amount in terms of GDP that has been allocated has been very low since very long time, since independence, you can say. Now right. It is increasing, but it is not up to the mark what we are expecting.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. If you look at healthcare, it has gone up to what, about 1.3% of our GDP now. Countries like Bhutan, many of our neighboring countries spend more percentage of their GDP on healthcare than we do. And this 1.3% of GDP is now because we have allocated 3 lakh crore rupees in this present budget for healthcare, considering the pandemic and all of that. So healthcare on the whole generally has been an area which has been of concern for us. It is not something new historically as well. We've done very little with regards to healthcare. I expected much more, considering that we were in the midst of this pandemic, considering um, the kind of impact that COVID-19 has had on us. Our healthcare infrastructure has been thoroughly exposed as a result of the pandemic, and governments are to blame. State governments, central government, everyone is to blame. Who isn't to blame? The infrastructure has been poor. It's an area that we have not focused on. Instead, what we focused on is on freebies. Freebie politics is, very famous and very common here in India. The state that you belong to, Tamil Nadu, has seen it over the years. It's the master of freebie politics. So, they tend to look at and go after such schemes rather than looking at healthcare as a whole. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to politics. It comes down to getting votes, and how are you going to get votes? So the big ticket ideas, the big ticket reforms, the big ticket changes come with only one intention in mind, as to how will I get the votes. And that has been the focus of successive governments over the years, and hence uh, healthcare has been neglected. Education, now we're seeing some kind of a change really as far as the education is concerned. The national education policy is definitely a step in the right direction, but implementation is going to be key. We've got several great schemes, several great policies in this country. I feel we have one too many, and even the laws are brilliant. But unfortunately, the implementation of the law, interpretation of the law becomes a problem. Same thing with schemes and policies. Implementation becomes a major stumbling block, not just within India, even for projects that we conduct outside of India. It's the same story. The biggest problems with our neighbors and our neighboring countries that they have with us is that we don't complete our projects in time. The implementation is a problem. Bureaucracy, red tapeism comes in the way. Let's not forget the kind of system that we have in place right now. There are many schools and education institutions that are used to running in this particular way. So there is a major lobby from the education system and the education institutions that are already in place right now. So they wouldn't want to see change, because change means it's going to be more difficult for them. So there is some kind of resistance with regards to the current existing education institutions as well. And we've been conditioned to go with what we have right now. We believe that it's a system that has worked. It's a system that is ensuring that we actually gain knowledge, but that is not happening. So we are changing that. We're trying to change that, at least. Let's see how it is implemented.
Yeah, okay. Shall I move on to next question, sir?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And this is with regard to politics. How do you look at the trend of civil servants and constitutional dignitaries entering politics? Like, why isn't there any cooling off period being proposed to I mean, it is very good that such people who occupy higher posts are getting into politics, and the human resources not getting wasted. I mean, we are better utilizing the human resources, but then isn't it prudent to have a cooling off period to tackle conflict of interest issue in the future?
Okay. According to the recruitment laws of 1959 or 1962, I can't quite remember, there is actually a cooling off period for bureaucrats. Okay. There is a 1 year cooling off period, and they have to take that 1 year cooling off period after they retire or after they move out of government. But if the government gives them permission in writing, then that cooling off period can be waived off. That is the case with retired bureaucrats. You've seen that many bureaucrats have gone to join the boards of several companies and take on post-retirement jobs. So there is an immediate cooling off period of 1 year, and only after 1 year they can actually take up this post. So that is there. But there is also a way out of that. If the government gives the concerned bureaucrat permission, then they don't need to go through that whole 1 year of cooling period. Now, with regards to bureaucrats or constitutional people holding constitutional posts coming into politics. I don't have a problem with that. There's nothing wrong in that. Once a person is retired, once a person has moved on, why not serve the country? See, politics is also about serving the nation. It is about, doing the best thing for your country. Whether it happens in reality or not, that's a different thing. But the idea and the concept is basically to serve the people. And who better to serve the people other than someone who has been in public service? All their life, they've been doing public service and they've been trained to do that, right? Um, I know that, you may then ask, are they really doing public service? There are those who are doing public service and who have done well also. But then there are those who aren't doing their job well. And maybe they are being promoted, or maybe they are the ones who are getting a berth in the cabinet or in politics. I'm not going to get into that. But the principle of bureaucrats getting into politics is something that I am not against, and I don't think any one of us should be against, because they bring with them a lot of experience. They bring with them a lot of domain knowledge. They bring with them a different skill set that politicians cannot bring in. Right? We've seen a lot of this happening in the US as well. The president is capable. I mean, has the responsibility or the powers to appoint anyone whom he deems fit to lead from the front, right? And he looks at domain expertise, and he looks at people who can probably bring in some kind of a positive into that role, and then goes with it. So if you're looking at domain experts there, why not domain experts in the cabinet as well? It's something that can work, and I don't think it's a problem. But if the person is joining while in service, or if a person who is in service starts playing politics, then it becomes a problem. But a retired person, I don't think there should be any problem there. That's my answer, Prabhakaran.
Okay, sir. Even I too agree with that, but my problem was like, there might be a conflict of interest issue arising if they join immediately after service. So that is what my intention was.
Like I said, so but there is a loophole there also. So there's nothing that is nothing that is illegal that is happening. So there is a loophole there, and it can be filled in. If it can be filled in, why not?
Okay, thank you. And my third question is with regard to related to economics. On one hand, there is enormous labor shortage, particularly in manufacturing sector, sir, in our state. On the other hand, there is a rising unemployment over the last 4 or 5 years. So how do you tackle this paradoxical issue? And similarly, in the service sector, whether it is teacher-student ratio, or the doctors and people ratio, or the civil servants or judges with respect to people, these ratios are very high that we are not able to provide effective and speedy delivery, delivery of services to our citizens. So why don't we increase the human resources so that the problem of both unemployment as well as the service delivery issue are addressed simultaneously?
Increasing workforce, increasing human resources, great idea. Where is the money going to come from? Who's going to pay for this human resource?
Yes, so there is an issue of fiscal deficit, but then service delivery is also very important, right?
So the government is trying to become leaner and meaner and thinner with every passing day. Private sector is not in it for philanthropy. They are in it only if they see some kind of business, if they see some kind of positive growth from that perspective, they will do it. Secondly, why will the private sector hire? Why will the private sector do anything? Because there is so much of a mistrust between the general public and the private sector. The moment the private sector comes in, the only thing that comes into our mind, or the first thing that comes up, is, oh, these people are there only for the money and for nothing else. So why should we trust them? So that mistrust needs to go away, because the private sector creates a lot of jobs. The government is saying that we are not in the business of doing business, and the government is trying to move away from the business of doing business. There are several vacancies that the government needs to fill up. These are basic vacancies that need to be filled up. And I believe that the government is doing a wrong thing by not holding examinations, or by holding examinations and not declaring results. There are so many youngsters who are just desperately waiting for this. And they have put in so many years of hard work, put in so many years of toil, getting through these examinations and trying to prepare for these examinations as well. So the government is doing a disservice by not, firstly, carrying out many of these examinations, and secondly, those examinations that have been completed, at least the appointments should be made. That way, there is, at least a large chunk, if not a large, at least a certain chunk of the population who gets jobs. The private sector needs to be empowered a little more. If you look at all the indexes in India, indices rather, uh, they're not in favor of the private sector. Ease of doing business, we are nowhere. If it comes to labor laws, we've not carried them out. Land laws, you look at Indian companies themselves, look at what happened in Singur and the Tatas, right? So where is the investor sentiment, one, and where is the sentiment from the private sector to actually increase the workforce when they know that something like this is going to happen, or when they know that they do not have a strong foundation to stand on? That is the second thing. Thirdly, the industry is not going to hire from the open market, because they also know that the education system that we have in India is flawed, and those who come out of our education system are not job ready. So the industry needs to further train them to ensure that they are good enough to work in their respective companies. This is where skilling is going to play a big role. There are only that many jobs that India can create. At our peak of our growth rate, we did not create the kind of jobs that we desired. It was still far lower than what we desired. Here's what we need to do. It's an innovative idea, but I think it's something that can be done. I'm going to quote the example of Germany now. Why did Germany take in so many immigrants? Why did they open their doors? Do you think that Germans had such a large heart that they wanted the whole of West Asia to be in at their doorstep? No, they have an old population. They don't have anybody to work. They don't have anybody to do their jobs there. So hence they needed a younger population. They needed people who can actually go ahead and carry out their work. Majority of the Western world and the Far East are in that zone, in that space where they don't have people to work, where carrying out day-to-day work is becoming difficult. This is where I feel Indian companies and the government itself should take a proactive role, try and understand what are the needs of some of these countries in the West or elsewhere, because there are many people who want to go out and work. Some kind of an agreement that we have with them, that they will work for 10 years and come back, or work for 20 years and come back, not go there as citizens, not go there as immigrants. They are just going there to carry out a service. A needs something to be done, B is providing the people to do that work, right? That way it answers many of our other problems as well. That is something that I think that we should proactively do, and it has tremendous scope. But we need to identify, find out what is it that A wants, so that B can get people ready for the job there, and then send them there so that they are easily accepted. Why do you think these countries like Canada and Australia and many of these other countries have this whole list of whom they want to take in? Technical jobs are given priority. People who have technical skills and technical knowledge can go. Again, I'm not saying that we need to send them there permanently, because these are people which are an asset to our country. This demographic dividend that we keep talking about, the window for that is very short, the next 15 years. After that, India is going to go into a spiral where we will have more old people and less young people. That's what's eventually going to happen. Same thing has happened in China as well. So that is when these people can start coming back and start helping out here as well. And it also soothes the sentiment of the Western world or the country that these people are going to work at, saying that, okay, these people are not going to take over because eventually they're going to go back. This is a little radical, but I hope we can do that. And as far as teacher-student ratio, yes, there is a massive problem. There is a deficit. Even if you look at the citizen to police ratio, where is that? But that is so because the vacancies have not been filled up. Let them fill up the vacancies, then this issue also will be sorted out. That is what we need to do. That's my answer to your question.
Okay, sir. Actually, my first part of the question was like, there is on the one hand, there is labor shortage in our area, whereas there is rising unemployment throughout the country, like for the past 4 or 5 years. That was the data reported in one statistics. So how to resolve this paradox? Like on one
Yeah,
hand,
like I told you with the international thing, no, you find out, you understand, okay, Tamil Nadu has a shortage of labor, find out where you can have the labor sent from, send the labor from there. We are one country. It's not like, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra separate and all of that. It's not like that. We should work together. We should have a pool of individuals. If you look at the United States, look at Canada and Australia and all these other countries, the government has data of people, where are the people, who is jobless, what kind of skill sets they have, what kind of background they come from. We should create such a kind of a database and have that database ready. And if Tamil Nadu needs 100 engineers, if Andhra Pradesh has 250 engineers and they have excess, send those 100 engineers to Tamil Nadu and get the work done. This is something that has to be done by the governments. It's no individual can do this. The central government, in collaboration with the state governments, we talk about cooperative federalism and all of that. This is how we do it. This will be the true spirit of cooperative federalism.
yes, sir. Actually, you are right. Like the data has to be collected, particularly with this COVID crisis. The data.
It's not difficult. You look at the kind of Aadhaar data that we have collected. You look at the kind of everyone is on a mobile phone now, right now. You create an algorithm. You create some kind of an AI. Run the algorithm. You'll get everything. You'll get all the data. It's not very difficult.
Okay.
When direct cash transfer can be done and you know that there's no pilferation, why not this? Simple. It'll take a year. It'll take a year and a half or whatever, but get it done. You start working now and then it'll get sorted out later. There will be teething issues, just like GST also had so many other issues. This will also have issues. This will also have opposition. People will say this and that. But you have to get down to doing it. No. Somebody has to bell the cat.
Okay, sir. Thank you. And the next question is with regard to recent clash between Assam and Mizoram. Particularly when we are having territorial disputes with our neighboring countries, isn't it right or prudent to be prudent that we should set our own house in order on a priority basis? The internal territorial disputes is like something contrary to what we are saying, like with regard to resolution of border disputes.
Who doesn't have problems, Prabhakaran? See, you look at Spain, Barcelona, Madrid, and all the others. Catalonian region has been fighting for such a long time, right? For separate statehood and all of that. Similar is the case. Secessionist mindsets are there everywhere. You look at Pakistan, Balochistan has its own thing going. If you look at any other country, there are problems. It's like a family. You cannot say that, in a family that you have no problems at all. If you don't have problems, that means something is wrong. And what is India? What is Bharata? Bharata Varsha is a union of states. Okay, the amalgamation of various languages and various small little cultures together. So when tempers run high, sometimes these things happen. I'm not an expert on this particular issue or this particular conflict, so I'm not going to say much because I've already done one discussion on this subject and I just finished recording it. So I have enough knowledge to answer a question, but I'm not going to answer because I'm not an expert and I don't like to misguide or state something wrongly. I've done a whole discussion on this subject and it will come out at 6:30 p.m. on Monday in Big Picture. And these are real experts, people who are on the ground, who have dealt with this issue, who are speaking about this. So they will give a more nuanced and a much more better answer with regards to the conflict in the Northeast. Are there no other conflicts? Well, there is a conflict between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka itself. It keeps happening every now and then with, with the Kaveri water river and other issues, even language issue and all of that. This is something that keeps coming up. So it doesn't mean that we don't speak to each other. We're sitting and sharing the same screen. You from Tamil Nadu, me from Karnataka. So these small issues, well, the issue that happened, on the Assam border is not that small. It is big because it's not flared up like this ever. But still, it is an internal matter that needs to be dealt with. It needs to be focused on, and it needs to be sorted out. And like we've sorted out several other issues as well, we must try and sort out this issue too. Central government's role is big in this issue because it's a matter between two states, and the central government has to take the lead in trying and bringing down tempers and dealing with the issue appropriately. Hopefully the courts will also, at some point in time, the courts are going to intervene with this matter, and then it is going to see some kind of forward movement the way we would like to see is going to happen. So let's just hope for the best. As far as sorting our house in order is concerned, well, everybody has problems. Yes, it would be nice if we can sort it out and these problems don't come to the fore, but every time they come out, we have to just deal with them.
Okay, sir. I asked this particular question because only recently I know that it is a very long-standing issue between the states, but it should have been resolved much earlier when the states are bifurcated.
Kaveri issue is also over 100 years old.
But it is a natural resource, right? Like the water.
It is still not sorted. It will not be sorted in the next 100 years also. Why the issue of Belagavi and Maharashtra and Karnataka, Belgaum, that has nothing to do with natural resource. That has to do everything to do with language and border and all of that. So these issues will keep coming up. It's not like they won't come up. We have to keep dealing with them from time to time. We need to understand that we are one country and that sentiment should prevail.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Good, Prabhakaran. Any more questions?
Yeah, I do have, but I think
we'll take one last.
Okay. Like this with respect to IR, international relations. Actually, we are part of many institutions where either China or Pakistan is part of. For example, SAARC, BRICS, and then SCO. But China is part of other associations which India are not part of. For example, the recent RCEP, which has been concluded, which we are not part of, right? So, likewise, how we are going to be a global power when we are not able to deal with plurilateral institutions, because we have good relations bilaterally with almost every nation, barring one or two. But why are we not able to forge a multilateral institutions where we are the we play a leadership role that can help us in achieving our national interests or being part of UNSC permanent nations? Why are we not doing that, sir?
We are doing all we can. You see, BRICS. Where is Pakistan and BRICS? Brazil, Russia.
China is there.
China is there.
Pakistan is there.
China is far bigger power than India. If we compare ourselves to China, I know many people are not going to like what I'm saying, but if we compare ourselves to China, it's a foolish thing to do. China and India's per capita income was the same in 1991. They are 4 times more than us now. So China is now competing with the United States. They've even gone past Russia and all the other countries. So for us to say that, we want everything that China wants is wrong. We should have demanded everything that China got during independence. Then it would have been a different scenario altogether. Now that bus has gone, if now we say we want everything that China wants, China has, it's going to be difficult. Right. So with the Pakistan issue also, we are dealing with it adequately. So you're talking about SAARC. SAARC is non-functional now. Nobody even cares about SAARC. But you look at, BIMSTEC, we are doing well. So that's the reason. So you spoke about plurilateralism. BIMSTEC is one good example. Quad is another good example. There are many more. There are many more like that. We are part of, we are talking about Quad Plus, we are talking about D10 now. India was invited to the G7 summit recently. So all these things are working for us. It's not like people don't want to engage with us. Democracies around the world have seen what China can do. The world is waking up to, to a possibility of another kind of a COVID pandemic and a very belligerent China. And that's why they are trying to move away from China. They are not pulling out of China completely, but they are diversifying. And hence we've seen companies move out to Vietnam, to Indonesia, Malaysia, and others, because they they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. This is something that the world has learned. This is where India can play a very crucial role. But going back to your previous question, we need to get our house in order first. Only then can we take advantage of the situation right now. So that is what we need to do. India, the potential is tremendous because of, if not for anything else, look at the sheer size of the market of India. That itself is a big positive. Why is it that FDI has gone up despite going through a pandemic, despite lockdowns all over the place? Because investors see massive upside to India. And this is something that will happen. And this is something that people will focus on. And we will continue to do our things, but we need to get our house in order and only then proceed further and then get full potential of what India can do.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great, Prabhakaran. Very nice to have answered all your questions. Some interesting and nice questions that you asked. I'm very happy to have engaged with you this way. Very nice of you to have been here as well. So thank you so very much. And I'm glad that we did this. It's amazing to have shared the screen space with you and to have to be here with you. Thank you so much, Prabhakaran. Over to you, Simran.
Pleasure is all mine, sir. Actually, it was a great opportunity to talk to you, interact with you, and ask you questions. And hopefully, I'll meet you in the future and ask more questions.
Done. I hope so too. And I hope once things settle down, we can meet in person and we can definitely, I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to wish you the very best and wish you all success in life. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Prabhakaran, for joining us today, episode of FRP on Hot Seat, and enlightening us with your questions. Also, I would like to thank Frank sir for his precious time and valuable insight to the questions. If you are someone who wanted to be on FRP on Hot Seat, then you can start by participating in big picture quizzes through the application of Bharata First or Knowledge Center website. If you like what we do at Bharata First and would like to contribute, then you can use our UPI ID, which is provided in the description box below. On this note, it's the wrap up of today's episode of FRP on Hot Seat. Till then, participate and keep winning. Follow us on all social media handles, and now we are also on Kuplat. Stay connected. Please like, share, and subscribe to Bharata First for such amazing content. See you soon.